Welcome to Banking Frontiers panel discussion on a very interesting topic, boosting return on AI. So partly we'll try to demystify AI and how it is being planned and executed in various financial organizations. And partly we'll try to demystify the return on AI and how it can be boosted. So I really look forward to an interesting discussion. We have 4 panelists with us and we're expecting a 5th person to join us. So initially we'll start with a round of introduction. And let me introduce myself. My name is Manoj Agrawal. I'm the group editor at Banking Frontiers magazine and really had a fantastic journey over 20 years interacting with and exploring what the financial sector is doing in terms of policy, in terms of innovation, in terms of strategy, in terms of technology, and so many other areas. It's a very dynamic sector and we are happy to be associated with it. I request my other panelists to briefly introduce themselves and then we'll get on to the panel discussion.
Firstly, thanks for inviting us over. This is a lovely topic of conversation and it is very relevant in today's date. So I've been in BFSI sector for about 25 years, started with banking and financial services, the last 2 years in insurance. And I think it's been a very, very interesting time for the last 25 years, and every sector has gone through various churns. You've seen the on the upside, one of my first companies really to reach its zenith at the same time, and now they've announced their exit. So I think it's full circle to in this industry for some of the giants of the industry or some of the pioneers of this industry. So I think we are it's continuously a learning, it's a continuous learning process for all of us. There's a continuous challenge in the industry also which is coming in, and this is what I think gives us all, especially in technology, a kick to remain relevant in the organization and to remain relevant for the industry.
Great. Thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you.
Deepak.
Yeah, hi. Good to be part of this, panel discussion. Manoj has been a friend. We've had many interactions in the past. I've been in banking and financial services for about 21 years now. Currently, I'm with RBL Bank. I head up the IT function there. I handle, program office, IT strategy. I run a small agile center of excellence. And a few other things. Looking forward to learning and sharing my views.
Great, thank you, Deepak. Welcome. Vasu, can we have your introduction?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm an Aegis employee posted to India to the Aegis joint venture in India, which is Royal Syndrome. So I came 18 months ago from Singapore.
Okay.
I'm a newbie to BFSI. I have been brought into BFSI to challenge the status quo because the company prior to Aegis, the Aussie company, felt that insurance people are too stuck in their ways and therefore wanted to bring people who had no connection to BFSI whatsoever. So I come from a completely non-BFSI background. And that has helped to some degree to challenge and bring new perspectives to an otherwise very insulated industry. So it's been a very interesting journey. I've been in the BFSI only 7 years, more specifically insurance, which is a more backward sister of the BFSI, which is therefore much more interesting to have those conversations. So I'm the Chief Digital Officer. I also handle unofficially the CMO role as well.
Okay.
But my official role is CDO. But I wear 2 hats. So that's my role in Royal Syndrome.
That's interesting, Vasu, the background that you've come from a different background and bringing in new ideas. Insurance, yes, has been a segment that behaves differently from typical segments, especially consumer goods kind of segments.
Correct.
So fresh thinking definitely would make a difference. So that's great. Neeraj, your introduction, please.
Yes. Hello all. My name is Neeraj Nakle, and I lead the solution consulting business for Blue Prism in India. I joined Blue Prism roughly 2.5 years back, and before that, I worked with global banks So I started to work in field of automation when automation was not that big deal, and it was all about writing scripts and macros. And I was fortunate to see that how that area evolved from that small team of people writing scripts to what today it has evolved from robotic process automation to artificial intelligence to machine learning and so on. So spend most of the time with banks. Past 2.5 years is pretty interesting because working with Indian BFSI sector is really something. So looking forward to learn something new from this panel. Thank you.
You have been in a great spot last 2.5 years. The financial sector is really amazing. And whatever prediction I make about how amazing it is, it will turn out to be even more amazing. Great. My opening question is basically relating to the practical definition of AI. Because there are all kinds of AI is such a subject that there are all kinds of definitions and all kinds of views. So in a work atmosphere, in the professional, in the organizational atmosphere, how is your practical definition of AI changing? Is it getting broader? Is it getting more focused, more narrowed? Or is it remaining as it was, last 2, 3, 4 years? What is the change? What is the delta? Maybe Vasu can come in.
So I being the outsider to the industry, I have my own definition, which is not my own. It's just a learning that I picked up. So I define AI as a perpetual self-learning software program. Very simple.
Okay.
Right? Because I'm a digital guy, I'm not a techie. So I always come from the outside, right? So it needs, so what is the customer uplift experience? And therefore, what is the business outcome uplift? Because today technology is no longer a challenge. Technology has become a commodity, right? So I feel that there's too much fuss around the technology and less fuss about the customer business outcomes and the customer experience.
Okay. A self-learning system that helps business flourish.
Correct. And most importantly, meeting some kind of a customer KPI. And that is because if the customer KPI moves, your revenues will also move.
Yes. Cool. That's nice. Deepak?
Yeah, see, one of the topics that have actually dominated the boardroom agendas have been, artificial intelligence and human stupidity. And for a very long time. Right. See, I have a very simplistic way of looking at it. Artificial intelligence is nothing but, ability for a computer or a calculator to do, computations much faster than a human being, right? I agree with what Vasu said. As long as it is able to uplift, either efficiency or throughput or customer experience, and the usefulness of it that we can see, and the value of it that we can realize, that's artificial intelligence for us.
Okay. So both of you have a kind of a broad definition, not very techie, narrowly focused. So that's broadening the playing field. Gaurav, what is your take?
Yeah, I won't go into definitions. I think Vasu and Deepak have defined it well. I'll say what it can do, it can't do. I think a lot of times AI is mistaken to be far more pervasive in the various organizations than it really is. What I mean to say is that people try and put in basic algos and then call it AI and say we've AI-fied it, the functionality or the application or the system, whereas the reality is far from that. Okay, in a situation where it is not automatically improving the output, then I wouldn't call it the AI engine, or AI solution. And that is where people fail to think. They think that any algorithm which has been fed in tends to give an output is AI, where it is not. Okay, there's a lot of things that have been achieved from day one. Okay, and we tend to narrow it down to everything as AI, whereas we need to a certain kind of definition like what Vasu talked about. It should be self-learning and it should be self-sustaining. That is where we really get the benefits, and that is where what true AI is.
Okay, so all three of you are largely in agreement. Neeraj, what is your take on AI? And is it getting more broader?
Yeah, so let me add to what Vasu, Deepak, and Gaurav said. And my definition is basis the discussion that I have with the customers and prospects of Blue Prism. So if I take a technical definition to it, and if I divide the business processes into deterministic, non-deterministic, and semi-deterministic way of doing the work.
Okay.
Customers expect that anything that is deterministic or semi-deterministic shouldn't be called as AI. It should be simply called as a process automation. Anything that is complex, semi-deterministic, and non-deterministic, that should be called as AI. That has some sort of complex algorithm built. For example, if you talk about banks, loan origination is a very popular use case. In that, keying the loan data into the systems can be termed as deterministic or rule-based. But say, for example, extracting data from say KYC documents, and in India there are some 36 type of different KYC documents. Can we build a software to extract data from KYC document without training it much? Can it build a model in it itself to extract the data? So customers and prospects want to call that piece as AI. Meanwhile, the deterministic piece can be called as either in process automation or workflow or script. Just trying to be a bit technical here because that is what I do. So this is
No,
what I think is AI can be called as.
that's good. The whole idea was to get variety of definitions so that we all at least know what we are talking about. So great. Let's go ahead then. Could I ask the BFSI participants to give one example each from their organization, one recent example of AI, just again to set the context, something interesting that you have maybe not seen in other organizations as commonly.
Let me go first. I mean, let's just demystify this a little more at a few more layers below just the broad level of definition. See, there are three ways of looking at it. There is artificial intelligence, there is machine learning, which is a subset, and then there is deep learning, right? And things like your bots, etc. I think the Blue Prism guy was talking about supervised, assisted, unassisted, self-healing, etc. So the bot, what it really does, it makes the repeatable tasks faster and helps us improve accuracy, helps us comply better and bring in efficiencies. So that is what I think a lot of companies today have leveraged and fairly successfully. I remember when Blue Prism's competition was in India. I think they launched about 6 years ago when Mihir Shah was in India. There was a very grand launch party. I was invited there. It was a forum full of CFOs and CEOs and people from the board. And they were all very excited about what, at a transaction level, what are the efficiencies that it can do.
Okay.
But then they started stocking up to the value, because the actual cost of labor in India is very cheap. And then if you start comparing license to the value of labor and this and that, and then the numbers don't really stack up. So I think today a short answer is a lot of financial services companies have started getting the story of repeatable tasks right using normal bot level automations. We're not even gone towards cognitive or intelligent automation or self-healing bots. All of that is, at least in my mind, has not reached a certain level of maturity yet.
So is that what you see, a lot of deterministic AI, full speed, high speed AI fulfilling tasks?
Absolutely. I think, there's no two ways about it. I think there's a lot of, headroom to, build stuff. So let me give you an example. So today we have customers who walk into our branches and they ask for, 15G, 15H waiver forms, right? Typically these citizens who have deposits. The process is, they go, customer walks into the branch takes the request, they submit a ticket travels to the central office. In the central office, there is a central queuing mechanism. Then it goes to the right department. Then the department picks it up. They look at the document validation. They look at the service request. Then they basically do the actual ticket marking. There's nothing but simple flag that needs to be waived off in the core banking system that says that this customer has produced sufficient documentation. Documentation is verified to be good in order, and therefore the tax exemptions must need to be given.
Mhm.
This one request it takes roughly about 8 minutes in our bank, right? When we deployed things like, and we work with Blue Prism, and we work with other partners as well. We work with Nividius, we work with UiPath. This request, right from the origination to the fulfillment takes about 30 seconds roughly. Right. So that's the power of this automation. If we define the processes well, if we write the rule engine correctly, and if we are able to pick the right kind of use cases, that's the level of efficiency. The level of efficiency is about 3000%. It's just not
Good, yeah.
right? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of headroom to move away from just basic bots to much more intelligent, much more cognitive, much more self-healing situations.
Okay. Thanks, Deepak, for that example. Gaurav, any example you can share?
So we have used we've taken a few areas where I think we've been partially successful, or rather fully successful in one example. I'll give you an example. We call it rapid claims. Okay, as you know that claims come in, and in the initial part of the year last year, we had successfully stabilized our claim processing using video streaming. Okay.
Okay.
So 70% of our motor claims which are coming in are processed through a video streaming mechanism. The claim manager is available at his desk, and the dealer does the claim processing using a video stream where he assesses the damage to the car, and basis that the decision is taken. The second thing what we have done is we extended that is that if through the app which we have published, the dealer takes relevant photographs of the damage of the car. We started the journey last year actually, trying to identify a vendor which can automate the recognition of both the part as well as the damage, and thirdly the extent of the damage just by the photograph. So we've used Azure as a backend engine and a partner which has helped us implement that. So now the rapid claim journey is such that for a particular set of parts and the regular set of parts where the damage is there, the entire processing can be hands-free. That means the claim is auto-assessed by the engine and gets paid out also by the engine. Okay. That is the nirvana we're trying to reach for all parts and all damages in all cars. Okay. But there's a learning process which is involved, a deep learning process which is involved in terms of learning or teaching the engine, the AI engine, what is the part and which belongs to which vehicle. So that part learning process is something which is carrying on. So right now, few parts are automatically recognized by the AI engine, and the damage part itself is identified and prompted to the claims manager. Basis that, of course, we have got in-house data warehouses which also assess the kind of damage which is taken place and what are the associated and the labor costs associated with that changing of that part. So in short, the image engine analytics and the image analytics which is happening is quite effective, and we have seen that irrespective of the photograph has to be of decent quality. I won't say amazing quality. It will automatically assess this part belongs to which car and where the damage is. So to a large extent, we have been able to make the engines learn that process. And of course, we had another thing which you said one example. I'm giving you two. One is the speech bot or the conversation bot, where the entire claims process journey is something we piloted last year, wherein a claims call comes in from a customer, and the conversation is happening with a bot, and the entire conversation of where the accident happened, the entire history of the thing is automated using this tool, and of course it's transcribed also for our system. That we have done with a single flow for a particular product. and we're going to expand that to more and more products. This is something which we did last year, and I think it's been successful
Great.
to a large extent. So we had a thing of about 80% on conversation flow in terms of this, and this is using English for the conversation, and it has been largely successful.
Okay, that's great.
So
Thanks.
what we
That's a
feel is
different-
in both cases that this is AI which is really touching to the heart of what an organization wants. That it is automating the processes, making it much faster. It is making it automated, which is leading to also lesser costs, and we can actually see areas where we can reduce our manpower costs, and it becomes more and more effective in that sense.
It's both examples that you have given and what Deepak has given
Yeah.
all point out to the measurability for sure. That's very
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
Vasu, what kind of example would you like to share?
So there are a lot of initiatives going on right now. I'm a bit hesitant to get ahead of the curve and jinx them. But let me share a project that I did in Singapore that I think is relevant to share. So the business problem was the windshield cracks or a break
Okay.
in the windshield, right? The processing cost, manual processing cost of that claim was far higher than the cost of the glass itself
Really?
in Singapore, right?
Singapore, not in
Yeah,
India.
in Singapore, right? Not in India. Probably it's cheaper in India.
Yeah.
So the question is, why are we spending more than the part cost? How do we solve this problem? Right? So that's a business problem. Obviously, there's a customer problem. Oh my God, I have to take this car somewhere, and then the windshield, and then claim and all that. So like I can't drive. So there's a customer pain point that comes along with that. So how that problem was solved, very similar to what Gaurav was kind of mentioning to some degree, was that what we did is that you take a picture of the windshield crack. The AI program will assess whether it's a fraudulent crack based on the crack parameters, the design, the shape of the crack. And if it is determined to be a genuine accidentally related crack, then your claim will be paid within 60 seconds
Okay.
into your bank account.
Fast.
Right? If not, that means if it's determined to be a fraud, it will be repudiated on the spot. Right? And then, however, it will tell the customer that you do have an opportunity to file a revised claim to have another, but then in that case, it becomes a manual assessment for which we said there will be a charge
Okay.
for a manual assessment, right? So it's discouraging, fraud,
Unnecessary.
right? Not so that was how that problem was solved. So there's a business problem, right? We solved it through photograph identification, running patterns. So what we had fed the AI with 10 years of windshield accident photographs, which were in the archives of the insurance company.
Okay.
So we fed that all those 10 years of photographs, which were genuine, and we also fed which were fraudulent. We said these are fraud and these are genuine. So you figure it out, machine. Next time you should be able to figure out which patterns in the breakage are looking like genuine and which patterns are looking like fraud.
So what was the efficiency of this thing in terms of mistakes? I mean, not in speed, but mistakes. How accurate was it?
We got very few complaints. I would say 99% success because we got very few complaints coming back for a petition to review.
Okay.
1 or 2%. That's it. Okay. And even the 1-2% were again confirmed to be fraudulent attempts of claiming. Right. So they never came back and challenged, neither took it to a consumer court.
Right? I think for the financial sector, this fraud prevention is a huge issue.
Right. Huge. So it served multiple purposes, right? Fraudulent, customers super happy, became a USP for the insurer, right? That, here's one insurance company, right? That, you get your claim in seconds, forget about days or even hours, right? Fantastic. And so the assessors that were used for that were then reassigned to other assessments, more total damage, right? Where actually you do need to have a physical person. So high value claims were redeployed. And I think eventually there was a headcount reduction as well in the assessors.
Good example. That's a great example. That's a proper AI example.
Thank you.
My question now is that having listened to various examples from each other, is there something that what you've heard from the other person that would want you to discuss in detail for your own organization? So are these examples in a sense meaningful? Are they a learning for you from each other?
So for me, what example Vasu is given is exactly what we are doing. So for the first part we did was the windshield. The second part we have done is the bumper. Okay, and basis the photograph is how we actually move on and do the assessment and do the, of course, closure also of the assessment, which is all taken by the AI engine, and the decision is passed whether it is a genuine claim, it is a fraudulent claim in terms of it has come earlier, the photograph has been submitted earlier, because dealers can tend to do that, submit the photograph from another vehicle. So to crack the system, so those things are something which are taken care of. This is something which is, of course, catching up with insurance companies worldwide.
Manoj, I think the AI, at least for insurance, I can't speak for banking, for people like Gaurav and I who are in insurance, I think the hygiene initial roadmap, I think, is pretty generic for all of us. I don't think there's
I
any
see.
unique learning for any one of us. We all know what needs to be done. We all know that what can be done. It's just about who can get it done earliest, who can get it done faster. I don't think there's any learning at the lower end of the curve.
Oh,
I think the learning will come after all the basic hygiene factors are covered. I think then the race to innovation would be. That is where I think, obviously, we don't want to share before deployment, and after deployment, obviously, we'll come to know.
right.
I think that is where the race will start, right? So I think generally, I've not been in India long. I don't want to comment on the Indian insurance industry too much. Gaurav probably is a better person to comment on it. My assessment in 18 months is we are barely scratching the toe, the small toe of the foot of 1 foot of AI in India.
Okay.
In insurance, right? So by the time we scratch the whole foot and move up the whole body, I think that itself will be like at least a 5-year plus journey. So we're far away from competing on innovation and AI. There's so much base level work that is barely visible to all of us. That is that can be done, and there's no learning to answer your question, right? In those initial stages.
Okay. So Deepak, does that make sense for you also? There's so much to do with what you already have on your plate that you really don't need to go and look out for ideas elsewhere as of now. Does that statement make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I can say, the banking landscape is a slightly more evolved story. And I've been in insurance before, and in my previous lives with AXA, where we launched a parametric product, a parametric insurance product, which is the typical flight delay insurance that we sign up for. When you buy a ticket, if my flight is delayed, I get about 1,000 for up to 4 hours of delay, right? All of that, people have used some level of artificial intelligence, some level of blockchain that I've seen. AXA Singapore. There's an AXA Singapore was a innovation hub, and they've used these use cases quite diligently. But in India, I tend to agree with what Vasu is saying. We're barely scratching the surface. There's definitely a lot of headroom to do, much more. We got on the conversational AI journey, and a lot of customer transactions are indeed becoming, conversational, using, bots, right? The chat bots,
Right.
is what we see.
Great.
And when we rolled out, I think we had about 1 million hits in the first month, right? We had actually tied up with a very small startup company based out of Bangalore. I know the founders personally, and they do really very good work on conversational AI, natural language generation, natural language processing. And we were able to launch a product and go live with it in about 6-8 weeks, and that's all that it took. And
That's
the
fast.
success has been quite phenomenal. Actually, a lot of people want to interact with the bots, and they just need the state-of-the-art information. They don't need state-of-the-art contact centers. They don't need state-of-the-art help. They just need state-of-the-art information that is reliable. So people are happy going to chatbots, talking through a faceless agent, as long as they get what they want to see, and if they're able to get on with their life, and so be it.
I want to compare AI projects versus traditional IT projects. I would assume in a traditional IT project, there are very few unknowns that you would have to worry about. There's so many years of experience and the technology is usually well understood that it happens as you plan. Is that the case with AI? Does the project typically roll out as planned, or it requires far more midway corrections compared to a traditional IT project? So is there a lot of guessing or playing around in an AI project, driving it ahead?
I think in a way, Manoj, and what happens is we can't bundle it all together in one bucket. Okay.
Okay.
Each AI vertical or use case has its own learning curve. So if you say chatbots, I think that's done and dusted. I think it's much easier. You've got plug and play systems which are available, and you can easily adapt to it. When you come to things like image analytics or conversation flow,
Mhm.
where voice is, you have to firstly, of course, no such AI project can happen without a proper pilot where we actually assess and see the feasibility of the system, as well as whether it is workable in a real case scenario. Okay, the language is like, in case it take conversation flows, language itself is a barrier. Okay, nobody speaks in pure English. You have to have English, for example. So we also try to, in our examples, we try to figure out the various AI engines which are available. There are a lot of people custom building their own conversational bots, and each of them brought in their own challenge in terms of integration, in terms of the percentages to which they will able to service the needs. So it is a journey which needs and it's not a standardized journey. Where the maturity levels have reached a level where we can take a decision and plug and play and move on. In such cases, we have to really experiment, try it out, and then comes the integration and actual implementation. Which
So
is,
bottom line, it's more experimental still compared to a traditional IT project.
it is experimental to an extent because you are needing to assess the various partners and the capabilities also. Everybody's capabilities are not the same.
Good point.
A lot of people have used their own mechanisms to drive the outputs, and some of them are trying to make it a standardized plug and play, but it is difficult.
So Vasu and Deepak, has your experience in terms of AI uncertainty been on similar lines, partners and stuff like that?
I think I mirrored largely what Gaurav was saying. I think my experience has been at the initial, the base planning infra, like Israel, doesn't seem to be too different. Yes, there are some nuances to what an AI would need in terms of server, if you take as an example, versus I think where it begins to differ largely is the input that you need to give an AI machine is the significant difference between a traditional software implementation where you will implement whichever way, waterfall or agile, doesn't matter, right? And then the bug checking after that also significantly, because in the self-learning program, it self-corrects itself. Right. So to me, the significant differences I found is in the BRD is not enough, right? So there's a BRD plus a learning document that one has to work on, which you don't normally work in traditional IT projects. So that's one. The second thing, your emphasis on looking for bugs is less. There are bugs, of course, but not to the same degree, because in a self-correcting program, you would expect it to discover its own flaws and fix it, which is what good AI programs have done and doing. There are other people who have done deployed bigger AI programs than I have. This has been my experience. So no, not at the base level, but as you progress, there are, yes, a lot additional work has to be done and a lot more preparation required. So for example, gathering 10 years of photographs, an example I gave you.
Not for a traditional project.
Something you would not do in a traditional IT project, right? So, give an example.
Deepak, any other kind of experimentation that goes on?
No, I tend to largely agree with the panel. I don't have any additional views. We must take iterative approaches. There is no monolithic project approach. We can't put a total cost of ownership for an AI project upfront. We don't know what the cost is going to be or what the value, the derived value is going to look like. We must employ design thinking approaches. We must deploy iterative approaches and work together to solve provide solves. See, let me give you this example of re-KYC. I'm sure all of us are impacted one way or the other. RBI has come down very heavily on customers to reactivate their KYC documentation with banks, right? We've had, I'm sure we've all had our moment of frustrations, right? Where our accounts are frozen. Now, I work for a bank. I used to be with Kotak for quite some time. My account was frozen for no rhyme or reason. And people working at the front lines, they don't even know. It's just the regulation, right? So we introduced a lot of automated solutions, video KYCs, a lot of mom and pop companies, started mushrooming to, solve for this intuitively. But again, the quality of images that we have for, gazillion million customers of the bank are all dated, you're switching jobs or, stickiness goes down so much that you want to move out and open another relationship, right?
Right.
So therefore, all the KYC documentation and all is heavily pixelated, and these new age technology solutions are not going to give you ready-made, answers. So, in one instance, we put our neck out and said, we'll solve this problem in 3 months to the regulator, but we could not do it. Neither could our partners be, have the right kind of solves. So, yeah, again, very, very iterative. We must be, mindful that there will not be definitive cost, definitive value. It's, these are things that we must, practically ad lib and, evolve as project life cycle happens, unfolds.
Very interesting. So I take two keywords, iterative and experimental. Let me ask Neeraj, in your engagement in Blue Prism, engaging with various financial organizations, do you see a lot of iterations and experiments? Is that the norm?
Yes,
And how is Blue Prism then, as a vendor, preparing itself to be agile?
So actually, so there is one very good learning that has helped Blue Prism to make its offering, and we learned that there is something called as cost of failure. Everyone wants their project to be successful, but when it comes to solving complex business problem through some sort of algorithm which haven't been used yet, so customers do take the consideration that what is the cost to evaluate a particular, say, automation. So for example, can we use low scale hardware? Can the software be no code so that our existing programs can use it? And does it take few days to test it out whether this particular workflow or whether this particular algorithm can solve our business problem? So if Blue Prism is offering that type of a offering where cost to fail is too less, maybe within a days. So many times customer can find out that, okay, just by spending say 2 to 3 days by downloading a simple API from web and doing some trial and error, what is the particular efficiency for that? So if your cost of failure is too less, we have seen that customers are willing to experiment, customers are willing to go into that kind of iterations. But if the cost of failure is too high, so for example, so in one instance, I was talking to one of the customer and they were saying that we are doing email classification from last 6 months in some other software, and that was completely black box to us. So if that cost of experimentation is too high, then customer will not would like to experiment that. So 2-3 things. Low code, AI should be low code. It shouldn't be like very, very complex. So even leveraging very complex algorithm like chatbots or the deep learning, can it be done by low code? Can it be done by not only very sophisticated hardware systems? Can we create complex flows in few days? So those are something that Blue Prism is trying to solve, and we have been fairly successful in not all fields, but in some fields like document processing is a very classical case. So we can build a very complex workflow to handle, say, for example, KYC documents in a matter of days. That is something that we have seen.
Okay, that's interesting. So that it's good that people like you can bring down the cost of failure,
Yes.
because I think that's a huge competitive advantage.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
if a project has to go through 10 committees and then get everyone's approval based on various parameters, that's a huge bottleneck for, especially for large organizations. Let's go on. I think one of you mentioned that you engaged some startup in Bangalore for one of your AI related projects. What about so? Let's look at from the other perspective. What if you get a? Do you get vendors who give you, or partners or consultants who give you like integration of AI and automation, so that so that they'll bring more domain expertise or more certainty to the solution? Are you looking more for certain solutions, or are you looking more to experiment? How does an organization think about AI? Let's experiment and see what comes, or let's be more definitive?
I don't think of AI at all, zero. I'm always thinking of the business problem that needs to be solved. And if AI is the right tool to solve that business problem, then we will look at AI. Because sometimes the answer is not AI, right? All of you know the story of the American pen that works in space, created at $1 million, of a 20-year-old story, and the Russians who solved that problem using a pencil, right? I'm sure all of you know that story. So I don't think we should jump the gun and go to determine that AI is a solution. So it's not on my mind at all, zero. In fact, no solution is on my mind. We work backwards from what's a business problem that needs to be solved, then finding the right solution, which is not necessarily always technology, right? Just we surprised some of the things that we could solve without using technology. So again, being completely agnostic to the methodology of solving the problem. Most often nowadays it is obviously technology, but not always. And then if it's AI, then it's AI. So to answer your question, I don't start with AI in mind.
Let me ask Deepak and Gaurav, in what kind of situations do you take a little extra risk with AI?
See, again, all low value tasks, right? I want to drop a file, I want to read an image, I want to compare, to reconciliation or data, I want to run some queries on a database. I want to synchronize, an API, for example, to give me a desired output. And these are all things, these are no-brainers. See, for us, the way we look at it, Manoj, we want to invest in things like RPA and chatbot and conversational AI, etc., voice commerce, voice bots, and so forth. And we want to make it very intrinsic to our technology and business driver. To an extent that we've taken some very ambitious targets. Next 3 years, we want to automate, let's say, the top 100 processes in the bank that are very manually intensive, very error prone, very fraud prone. So it's not a very generic approach anymore. It's a very definitive approach with a clear roadmap, clear committed investments, and also the choice of technologies is becoming clearer to us. We know exactly the investments we need to make in which kind of technology and who are the kind of partners that we want to work with.
So Neeraj, when banks and insurance companies come to you, do they come with very clear requirements, or do some of them come and say, we want to experiment and see what AI can achieve? Like some people want to be at the, what is the term for that? The early adopters and the visionaries who are willing to take risks just to try it out. Do you get those kind of customers, especially in BFSI?
Yeah,
maybe in other areas you do. How about BFSI?
Yeah, we do. And, the key is to set the right expectations. So because AI means multiple things to multiple people. And we have had customers where they want to solve the problem. And as Vasu said, say, for example, the same thing that I was saying, that a customer spends 6 odd months for the classifications of mails in customer service. So we gave a very simple option. Why do you want to use natural language processing to do that? Why don't you give customers categories in which they could raise emails, and that will create a very simple workflow flow. So I think a lot of the time we have seen cases where customers want to solve something, and for often we can have very simple ideas, and process change is also a very good way to do it. I mean,
Okay.
personally, I believe whatever shouldn't be automated should not be automated. So no matter what. So I think right expectation setting is key thing, and I think everyone is saying that in that iterative way of doing it. So I personally haven't seen that for any cognitive workflow to work at 100% accuracy on data. So we need to talk to our customers that okay, we will take it in say 3 phases over a period of say 6 months. First phase will cover say 30%, second will cover another 60%, and 10% will be some sort of exceptions. So that expectation setting has to be there.
Yeah, in
So,
this,
gentlemen, we have talked a
like
lot
to add
about.
to this, Manoj, I think a lot of times what the expectations from an RPA, especially from the business folks, is that it will come and solve and reduce the number of manpower to zero. Okay,
To zero.
Zero in terms of that process. Okay,
Okay.
so if a particular process is automated, and there are 5 people working on that process, and the expectation typically is that it will become zero if the process is fully automated. But
Fully.
one doesn't see the fact that RPA itself is a learning process. It doesn't. There are changes which come in the way the systems work to do change. So we have to invest in the licensing of the RPA as well as the workforce who can manage the RPA. So if you've got a dozen people or a dozen bots which are running in RPA, you will need a minimum 2-3 guys who are constantly monitoring that and adopting that to the changes which are happening. So it is not something which will automatically reduce the workforce. It is just reducing it and diverting some of the work to the I'd say a hybrid mode of automation from an RPA context.
Right. Got it. Understood. That's pretty accurate, actually. So we have talked a lot about AI. I want to get down to our other part, that is the return on investment on AI. And let's look at, to begin with, costing, for example, TCO. For a typical IT project, you guys can figure out the total cost of ownership, because you have lots of experience, lot of data, lots of factual information that you can use. When it comes to AI projects with a good amount of AI in it, and where there's some amount of experimentation going on, are you asked a lot of questions about TCO? Is that something that CFO or business owners or someone else is really interesting to get a good number in their hands, or they're okay with some kind of flexibility?
I don't think any CFO will be okay with investing large amounts without seeing an ROI. See, in case there is, I think, in my view, if it is a cost to failure like what Neeraj was talking about is low and limited, then you can always go ahead with. So, for example, if RPA, you can experiment with new processes, including the AI and embedding NLP in that. But wherein you're trying to see a process where there are large amount of investment have to go on and the process changes will have to go. So it is not just about the investment you're doing on the technology part. So in case you take conversational about it, it is the massive amount of integrations which you have to do. That is typically integrations which are throwaway in case the solution doesn't work. So the TCO should be established and we try to establish it. Is it easy to establish? No, it is not very easy to establish. Because some of these AI conversations are largely on the basis of when will I get the TCO, and that when is something which carries on for substantially larger time, because there is some amount of learning process which is there, whether it is image bots or conversation bot, where the learning process drags on, and that is where we see that the TCO is a bit difficult to define.
Okay. So Deepak and Vasu, typically do you see the business and the CEO and the CFO more interested in the TCO or the ROI? What weighs heavily in their mind?
I think both in my experience. I think, but before something related to this topic, I think it's very important for all of my peer group in banking and to have very progressive leaders. Typically, all of us report to the CEO. I'm very fortunate to have an MD who's very progressive and visionary in his mindset. So we have a test and learn budget, because you need to have a CEO with that mind. So we have a budget, and I refuse to give any total cost of ownership without a baseline, unless you're comfortable for me to pull out numbers from the air. What number do you want, right? So I'm not a fan of that. And I also refuse to give a TCO calculation without a baseline, which we don't have. So this is where a progressive leadership makes a difference. You need to have enough money to discover the baseline. Once you have the baseline, then you can make very near to accurate projections and take a call whether you want to go ahead or not. In the cases that we have done it, and we have all of our projects, we've been able to establish a successful return on the investment. So, but then, like I said, if my boss did not give me permission to test, to discover the baseline, then it's a no-go, right? If you have a very close-minded boss, then it's very difficult to do this. And then we're all forced to create, Excel magic.
I like that.
Right, which we cannot justify, right? At the end of the project, there's no correlation between your Excel magic to the actual reality, which only comes from a baseline. That's my learning. So I tell, if you know baseline, cannot do, will not do.
Deepak, what do you see typically more, ROI or TCO or something else?
No, I'm going to not going to answer that question. See, I'll give you an analogy. Okay, and I tend to sort of pick on what Vasu mentioned about progressive leadership. And there's once in the 2003 Test match in Sydney, right? India was some 700 for 7, and Brett Lee, who was at that time, who was the fastest bowler, had one of the worst bowling figures. He had some 4 for 200 or something, and he was like really sledged by the Australian media. And Ricky Ponting just told him, it's just the nature of the wicket, just keep chipping away, right? So there is a context, there is a perspective, and I like the idea of a test and learn budget. All the big tech companies are really going to needle the incumbents, needlessly, and we don't have to be really worried. We should just keep chipping away and taking value out of what we see as real value for our customers.
Okay, and very interesting. Any closing remarks from anyone? Any interesting perspective of AI that you want to share with your colleagues? Is there a question that the industry should raise?
I mean, I'm talking to the preached, but if we have other listeners, don't go after the shining toy for the toy itself.
It's not a toy, okay.
Yeah. I mean, just because it shines, don't go for it.
So I'll extend to that, the example which I give, Manoj, is typically the iPhone versus Android example. They say that, Android is always the first one to jump the gun and, have the innovation come into the thing. It may not be as polished. So, that typically the iPhone guys, the Apple guys try to polish the entire feature and then only release it and make sure that it runs well. Okay. In my mind, that's the kind of example I typically give. Is that unless you've been able to really thrash through the innovation or the AI part in such a way that it actually delivers value to the organization, whether it is measurable value in terms of efficiency and effectiveness or customer delight, that could also be something which can be. Until that can be, really seen and you've been able to implement something, for instance, examples I've given, where we're actually trying to implement that and see value coming out of it. I don't think we should pursue that notion just because it is, in Vasu's words, the shiny toy.
That's so. Both of you have talked of something that is like a very traditional wisdom, which still continues, which hasn't gone off the road just because there is new technology or fancy shining objects.
No, but that does not mean we don't experiment.
You don't?
It means we don't implement. There's a difference.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. So Deepak, what would you like to add as your closing remarks or closing question?
Well, no, I think we will, as banks that are, in the challenger banking space or a bit more ambitious in moving from, digital native to digital hybrid. I think we would like to experiment a lot more. and we will be open to learning or understanding learning from cross-pollinated industries. E-commerce is an example, right? I keep talking about hyper personalization in e-commerce, and why is my banking or insurance or wealth management or advisory not personalized, or why does it not give me the same level of personalized experience that an e-commerce company can give me? So that I think AI has a very large role to play, and I think the financial institutes have also become very cognizant to this fact, because better experience will improve the stickiness and better lifetime value generation for banks. So that I think that is an area that we should not shunt ourselves to, and definitely we need to be very cognizant about.
So that's interesting. So actually, BFSI should start looking outside as well, and need not just compare with each other. There are, especially when it comes to AI and RP and all that, there's a lot to learn from outside.
We don't benchmark, just because she said, so we don't benchmark anything that we do with insurance, by the way.
Oh, okay.
All our benchmarks are consumer.
Are what?
Consumer brands.
Consumer brands.
We
So do
don't
you do that
benchmark.
internally, or do you
Pardon?
have some external agencies doing it for you?
Combination of the two.
Combination.
But we don't benchmark against BFSI.
Which I think is the right approach, and a lot of us are taking that route, right? I mean, we're no longer comparing ourselves against, our competition is not the Citibanks or the ICICIs or the HDFCs of the world. Our competition is really Amazon and Netflix, and I think companies that are born in the cloud and mobile first, born in the cloud, cloud native, hyper converged. So I think that's where that's what makes our roles interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so wonderful discussion, a lot to learn, and I think so as you rightly said, business problem is a key to start. Okay, whether it's AI or not AI, does this particular technology solve this business problem, and does it solve in a very predictable manner? Whether it is the cost to experiment, the cost to success, and can business leaders see in a very transparent manner that what they are spending over the next period of 3 years against what benefits? If that is done fairly, very simple manner, I think the AI propagation in businesses will be fairly simple. So mostly, so what a panelist has said.
So I think, largely all of you are saying the same kind of thing. So that looks like the road ahead for AI and business to work together. Right. So on that note, on that concluding thought, thank you all very much for being a part of this panel discussion with Banking Frontiers. Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you, Gaurav. Vasu.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.